Hello, my name is Tom Revel and welcome back to the second part of this webinar series for Autodesk, and let's get to it. So, as you know, we're doing weapon making and more specifically bow making in Maya 2016. So, let's continue. So this is what I would traditionally kind of end up with after I had finished up blocking out my model and I was going into the second pass, or should I say the first pass of my 3D model. So what I would do is, once I've got it up to the stage here, is I would actually be worried very much about accuracy. So if I put myself into the right-hand view, whoops, right view, yes, that's good, is that, as you can see with all of these sections here, you can see that via the wireframe mode, you can see that actually this is actually reasonably accurate to the object which I've traced out because of this. So if I go front view, you'll end up seeing that this is the same way here as well. So I'm just going to, and this is all traced correctly. Now you'll also notice that I've also added a screw here, because in the images, or should I say the reference images here, so we go back to our reference images. Yep, always refer back to the reference images regardless of what happens. You can see this section going on here. Now, because this is only a front view, I will have to kind of observe some other things on it. So what I traditionally looked at was, when I was going through this, is I ended up seeing this section here. Now I ended up basically modeling these little screws based upon what I saw here. So that's what I did there. Okay, so what I ended up doing from there is I ended up getting to about this section here. Now you may see that I've got a few of these open. There's a reason for that. Now what I also did is I also kind of lined this all up as well. So this is currently unaligned, but that's just because I just was kind of getting that done. And then what I can do here is, now I can hide this and I can go to the front view, and then what I'm seeing right now is that I have got this section here. Now, as you can see, I've added another reference image here to kind of outline the rest of this limb here, which is good. Now, what I would traditionally do here is go ahead and what I've done here is, just one second, let's hide that. I'll talk to you more about string later on. And what I did is, let's put this to shaded mode. Now I ended up basically extruding these out. Now these are little nodules at the tip of the limb. You can see that actually these come out, and these are to prevent the string, or should I say the bow string, to slip out from various sections of this bow. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is I'm doing this, and then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to smooth these out. So what will happen is that I'm actually going to go and smooth this section here and this section here. And what I'll do is, the reason why I will smooth this is because now this is actually looking correct in regards to all the accuracy that I'm doing right now with this, is that I'd go from here and go mesh and smooth, and then you'd end up seeing that I would end up having something like this. Now, the reason why I would be very, very careful about smoothing automatically is because I have seen from some of my teaching experiences that people kind of go a little too gung-ho on the old smooth tool, and it's very much the kind of case of, like, they just go, oh really, you have smooth tool, let's just go and smooth the hell out of it. No, I don't want that to happen actually at all, because one of the reasons why I think that this is actually very important to actually look and see that this is actually correct and before you go ahead is because you end up getting like really bizarre errors if you're not careful actually. And this is why I'm constantly talking to everybody when I'm going ahead and looking into models like this. I really am concerned very much about the topology as I go through it. So if I'm going to be smoothing this area out like this, I make sure that this is correct. Now at the moment right now, this is a very, very high poly model right now. So this would end up being close to, I mean, if I look at the end product here, let's put this to here. This is a 6,440 try model. Now that's not too bad, but too bad if for a high resolution game model. But if I was to go ahead and put it down to something that was a little bit more manageable, I'd probably be looking at least half of that as well. So that's the whole point there. So in the end, this is probably going to be like almost like a first LOD model, like basically a high resolution one, not even an LOD actually, to be quite honest with you. So you end up getting something that looks like this. Okay, so if I minimize that and then I smooth this section here out, now I've now got that correct. Now I also have to smooth this section here out because of these nodules here. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the front view and I'm going to go here and I'm just going to select all this section here, go mesh, smooth, and then before you know it, this is happening here. And instantly what I would do from here is I'd actually go and take a good majority of the polygons out of this section right here, because quite frankly I find with the smooth tool it gets a little too, you know, vigorous in regards to what it does, but what it does do, it does it well. So that's the case there. So what I'm doing is I would go ahead and I'd start removing all these polys, because quite frankly a lot of these edge loops don't need to be there. And then I would go ahead, start removing all this stuff here, and then before you know it, we have ourselves something that we can use. Now that's traditionally how I end up working most of the time, as I end up using the smooth tool to kind of get to where I want, and then I de-res it and to actually kind of get some more detail out of what I'm looking for, but not necessarily in the way in which the smooth tool does, because I find that actually this is the thing with a lot of Maya tools, is that you actually need to work with them in unison with other Maya tools and to actually kind of get the results you want. And that's what I will say about that. So now I'd kind of get something like this, but what I would, and here's something I've prepared earlier. So what I'd do traditionally is kind of get something that looks like this, okay? And this is what I would be getting towards actually. Now, as you can see, this particular model here. Let's just go ahead and just want to break the transparency there, just so that actually I have something to work with. So what I am going to see is that, as you can see, this is what I would end up with, something a little bit more close to this. Now this is really what I'm looking for. Now also, what I'd be also very interested is making sure that if this was a movie asset, I probably wouldn't worry too much about, I would probably be really worried about all these triangles going up here and making sure that it looked, because it doesn't look that great. But for a video game asset, I'm not generally worried about triangles at all, because I think that because it's a video game asset, it's going to be triangled anyway. So, sorry, it's going to be tessellized before you get into the game. So that's what I'm going to do there. Is it tessellized or tessellated? I'm not too sure. I think it's probably tessellated, but never mind. So what I end up doing is I would go with something like this, and then before you know it, I'd end up basically going ahead and I'd have this as being pretty close to being finished for me. Now, you may also notice that when I've done this section here, I could also reduce some weight out of this, as it were, here. So I could actually take something like this, remove this here, and go ahead and start removing a whole bunch of polys. Now, because this is just a demonstration, I would, and I would actually just kind of, I'm just going to leave it because it's actually something that I think is okay, is fit for purpose right now. Now, also, one of the things you may notice when I'm doing this is that I've actually, if you look at the difference between this model here and say this one here, let's go and have a look, is that you'll end up noticing that this one here is a little bit bulbous towards the edge here. Now, traditionally, that wouldn't happen in any degree of woodworking unless that was a specific need of the clients. Because what would actually happen would be is that it would be very flat and very close to the wood surface. So what I've done is I've actually taken this section here and I have flattened it all out and made it look good and just make it so that it's more in unison with what's actually happening here on the limb, which is great. Awesome. So now, with this in mind, what I would do here is I ended up moving on to this section here. Now, this string has been one of the biggest challenges of making this model so far. The reason why is because the UVs were constantly being a challenge to me, because I ended up basically having this issue of texture warping every time I pushed it into the engine. Now, one of the things which I ended up doing to kind of test this out would be to go ahead, and I'm actually going to show you something which is fairly important for texturing, because when I end up going ahead and texturizing and checking out and testing UVs, I always end up invariably using the AO, the function, sorry, I end up basically baking the AO down from Maya using the, just one second, let me just show you where it is. I usually use the batch bake tool in Mental Ray. Now, the reason why I think this tool is wonderful is because it allows us to test our UVs, and this is the whole point. When you're actually kind of going from, how can I put this? When you're actually going from point to point to point to point with your models, and you're actually kind of going from blocking out to first pass to second pass to UVs to texturing, and then from texturing to doing your sculpting, and then or something like that, or the process, because there's many different ways which we can go ahead and make our models from end to end. So what I traditionally end up doing is I use a tool like this, like is an AO tool, which basically bakes in all of the lovely shadows into my model, and it actually kind of gives me a good basis for my diffuse. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of texturing artists don't seem to talk about when it comes to texturing, because I love texturing. I really love texturing. I also know that when you're doing texturing, it's a good place to start with an AO bake. It is really good, because I'll probably be discussing this next in the next part of the video. So, because I think that that's one of the things I really, really love about texturing, is because you can actually take something which has been light baked and gone through all this process, and you end up getting something beautiful like this. It's just, this to me is gorgeous. It's absolutely wonderful. And if I look at the, let's just kind of go into this, into here. Now, if I look into the UVs here, now this is what I'm talking about. You can actually see, if I look at these sections here, you can actually see that this is that there's darkening points here, and if you look at the texture here, you'll end up seeing that there's a lot more richer colors that are coming out underneath here. And this is all part of the AO, and this is the reason why I think that it's something that really, really is so impressive, is because if you can start off with a decent AO bake, you'll end up getting results which look as impressive as this, or possibly even more so. And I think that's one of the coolest things about texturing, and this is why I think it's so important when you're actually going ahead and you're looking into UVs to start off with. And that's the reason why, coming back to my original point, getting good UVs done first is absolutely critical. And that's the reason why when I kind of say to people, let's just kind of look into UVs, it's something that people I think a good majority of us would say that UVs are something that we will probably actively avoid if we have to, but if we can. But I think some of us need to, I think it's just more the kind of case that we probably just need to hone our craft, as it were. And I think that this tool here is a good way of testing out your UVs. It's very, very accurate and very, very handy. And I'm just going to leave these settings up there for a few minutes, or should I say a few seconds more, just to show you what I'm looking into. So traditionally I don't usually worry about this. I usually make it about 2K to start off with. I pretty much make all my assets now in 1 or 2K. I never seem to kind of go up to 4K unless I really need to. But then I also make sure that texture fill scenes is on as well. I make sure that's all up to its maximum. If you were interested to know what this is about, you can research that at your own leisure outside of this webinar. But in essence, you end up getting stuff like this done, and it's really, really cool. I love it. It's just it is so beautiful. So now that we kind of have this kind of going on here, now with this string, I ended up using a mixture of CV curves to make it, as well as traditional skills, traditional model skills to kind of pull it all together. So what I actively did is I ended up basically creating this section here, combined it into this section here, and then I made it into something like this. So if I select just this section here, you'll end up seeing that these are the UVs here. Now I will say this UV selection, you may be saying to yourself, well, this is a webinar and everything should be perfect. I'm going to show you something which is imperfect. This way, I have got my UV selected. Sorry, I'm just going to select all the UVs right now. This is okay, but I would say this is, for me, unacceptable. The reason why is because you're going to get tons of texture warping on this section here, and you're also going to get very inaccurate results when it comes to this, because what you really want to do, and this is the thing that I'm going to go back to my final made model, and as I said before, this is one I made earlier, and let me have a look at just the string alone. Now, if I look into this, this is all the string is. It's just simply one material. Now, this is what we actively want to be searching for as 3D modelers, is that you'll end up finding out that there are these sections here. And you'll end up seeing that this is actually one huge piece, because what it does is it repeats itself from this UV selection here. So what I would traditionally do is that if I look at this section here, we'll end up seeing that I've made this into a wire section here. Now I've actually made this using transfer maps, and I'll be talking to you more about that in the next part, but as you can see, this is actually reflected up, and it goes all the way up to this point here, and then it goes to that section there. Fantastic. So I would end up basically kind of going ahead and making that like that. So we've got this section here, and it looks really, really nice. So this is pretty much the way I would go ahead and make that. And also I'd still worry about the shadows, because what you want to do is you want to also make sure that when you that even if you hid this section here, you would end up instantly seeing where the shadows were hugging into the object, because that kind of creates this more believable look into the objects that we are making, because ultimately we end up having little shadow spots like this section here and this section here, and you end up having like little shadow parts here. Now this is all adding to the believability of the model, and this is the reason why when we kind of going from these sections here in regards to the transition, is that you end up realizing that UVs are so much more important, because they end up defining a lot of what the object will eventually be used for. So that's verging towards the end of this particular part. So what we're going to be doing in the next part is we're going to be looking to more advanced texturing techniques, and I'm going to be going into some rendering as well. So next part will be mostly in Mudbox with a little bit of Maya to finish. So without further ado, I wish you all the best, and I will see you in the next part of this webinar series. Thank you very much. My name has been Tom Rewell, and goodbye.